When the enemy thought they had won, when her weapon lay shattered in pieces, when every man around her had given up hope, she proved that the deadliest weapon isn't always the one you hold in your hands. This is the true story of a woman who turned a moment of complete defeat into legendary victory, showing the world that sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one they never saw coming. The morning sun cast long shadows across the barren landscape of the Syrian border, where dust and death had become constant companions. Senior Sergeant Maya Kozlova adjusted her grip on the worn wooden stock of her Dragunov sniper rifle, feeling the familiar weight that had become an extension of her body over 3 brutal years of warfare. At 26, she had already earned a reputation that made hardened soldiers twice her age speak her name with respect, and enemies speak it with fear. The small outpost where Maya had been stationed for the past 6 months sat like a lonely sentinel on a rocky hill, overlooking a valley that had seen more blood than rain in recent memory. Her unit of 12 soldiers represented the last line of defense in this forgotten corner of the conflict, where international observers rarely ventured and media attention never reached. Here, in this place that maps barely acknowledged, some of the war's most crucial battles were fought in complete silence. Maya's commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Viktor Petrov, had initially resisted having a woman in his unit. He was a man shaped by old military traditions, where women belonged in support roles, not on the front lines with a rifle in their hands. But Maya had proven herself in ways that left no room for doubt. Her kill count exceeded that of any other sniper in the regiment, and her ability to remain calm under pressure had saved more lives than anyone cared to count. The outpost consisted of 3 reinforced concrete bunkers connected by a network of trenches that zigzagged across the hilltop like scars on weathered skin. Maya's position was in the northernmost bunker, where a carefully concealed firing port gave her a commanding view of the approach routes below. She had spent countless hours studying every rock, every tree, every shadow in that valley, memorizing the landscape until she could navigate it blindfolded. Her rifle was a customized Dragunov SVD, modified with a high-powered scope that she had personally zeroed dozens of times. The weapon bore the scratches and were marks of constant use, but Maya maintained it with religious devotion. Every evening, she would disassemble the rifle completely, cleaning each component with meticulous care before reassembling it in the darkness by touch alone. This ritual had become as essential to her survival as breathing. The enemy they faced was unlike any conventional force. Commander Hassan al-Rashid led a group of highly trained mercenaries who had turned this region into their personal kingdom of terror. Al-Rashid was a former Special Forces officer who had gone rogue, using his military training to build a network of fighters that combined guerrilla tactics with conventional warfare expertise. He was known for his cruelty toward prisoners and his particular hatred for women who dared to fight against his forces. Maya had been tracking al-Rashid for months, studying his patterns and movements like a hunter studying her prey. She knew that he personally led raids on civilian villages, taking supplies and recruits by force. She knew that he had a distinctive scar across his left cheek from an explosion years earlier. Most importantly, she knew that he would eventually make a mistake that would bring him within range of her rifle. The intelligence reports suggested that al-Rashid was planning a major offensive against government positions in the region. His forces had been moving equipment and personnel under cover of darkness, building up for what appeared to be a coordinated assault on multiple targets. Maya's outpost was not just a defensive position. It was a critical observation point that allowed friendly forces to monitor enemy movements across a wide area. On this particular morning, Maya had been in position since before dawn, watching the valley through her scope as the first light revealed the familiar landscape. Her spotter, Corporal Dmitry Volkov, lay beside her with his binoculars and range-finding equipment. Dmitry was barely 20 years old, but he had developed an almost supernatural ability to read wind patterns and atmospheric conditions that affected long-range shooting. The radio crackled softly with routine communications from other positions. Maya listened with half her attention while keeping her eyes focused on the valley below. Years of combat had taught her to divide her awareness between immediate threats and background information, filtering the important signals from the constant noise of military communication. At precisely 8:30 in the morning, Dmitri spotted movement near a cluster of rocks about 800 meters away. Through her scope, Maya could see figures moving carefully between the boulders, trying to stay hidden from observation. Their movements were too deliberate, too tactical to be civilians or regular army units. These were al-Rashid's men, and they were conducting reconnaissance for their planned assault. Maya tracked the enemy patrol through her scope, counting at least 6 fighters armed with assault rifles and what appeared to be rocket-propelled grenades. They were moving in a classic scouting formation, with one man advancing while others provided cover. Their discipline and coordination confirmed Maya's assessment. These were not amateur fighters, but experienced soldiers who understood modern warfare tactics. The standing orders for Maya's unit were clear: engage any hostile forces that approached within effective range of the outpost. But Maya held her fire, recognizing an opportunity for something more valuable than eliminating a small patrol. If she could track these scouts back to their base camp, she might finally get the chance she had been waiting for, a clear shot at Commander al-Rashid himself. For the next 3 hours, Maya and Dmitri followed the enemy patrol as it moved through the valley, mapping out defensive positions and approach routes. The scouts were thorough and professional, taking photographs and making detailed notes about the outpost's apparent weaknesses. Maya realized that al-Rashid's attack was probably planned for the coming night, when darkness would give his forces the advantage. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the enemy patrol began to withdraw toward the eastern edge of the valley. Maya tracked them through her scope until they disappeared into a complex of caves and rocky outcroppings that had been carved by centuries of wind and water erosion. She made careful notes about their exact position, knowing that this information would be crucial for the coming battle. At noon, Maya reported her observations to Lieutenant Colonel Petrov through the encrypted radio channel. The intelligence she provided painted a clear picture of the enemy's preparations and likely attack routes. Petrov listened carefully to her assessment, asking detailed questions about enemy numbers and equipment. Maya could hear the concern in his voice. Their small garrison would be heavily outnumbered if al-Rashid committed his full force to the assault. Petrov made the decision to request immediate reinforcements from regional command, but Maya knew that help was at least 12 hours away. The nearest friendly units were engaged in their own operations, and the limited helicopter assets were committed to supporting a major offensive on the other side of the country. For all practical purposes, Maya's outpost would have to hold its position alone until dawn. The afternoon passed slowly as Maya and her fellow soldiers prepared for the coming attack. They checked their weapons and ammunition supplies, tested their communication equipment, and reviewed their defensive plans one final time. Maya spent extra time with her rifle, verifying the zero on her scope and calculating range cards for every possible shooting position in the valley below. As evening approached, Maya took her position in the northernmost bunker and began her vigil. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded her of the wheat fields near her childhood home in rural Russia. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember peaceful times, helping her father with the harvest, learning to shoot rabbits with an old hunting rifle, dreaming of adventures that seemed impossible from their small farming village. But those memories faded quickly as darkness began to creep across the valley. Maya adjusted her night vision equipment and settled into the focused mental state that had kept her alive through countless engagements. Tonight would test everything she had learned about warfare, survival, and the price of defending what matters most. Through her scope, she could see the first signs of enemy movement as al-Rashid's forces began to advance under cover of darkness. The battle that would define her legacy was about to begin, though Maya had no way of knowing that her greatest challenge would come not from the enemy's bullets, but from the failure of the weapon she trusted most. The radio crackled with a final message from Lieutenant Colonel Petrov. All positions, prepare for contact. This is not a drill. Hold your positions at all costs. Maya acknowledged the transmission and turned her full attention to the valley below, where shadows were beginning to move with deadly purpose. In the distance, she could hear the faint sound of vehicles approaching, trucks carrying al-Rashid's assault force toward their final staging area. Maya estimated at least 40 fighters armed with automatic weapons, grenades, and portable mortars. Against this force, her outpost could deploy 12 soldiers and whatever firepower their individual weapons could provide. But Maya had something that al-Rashid's men did not expect: the deadly precision of a sniper who had never missed when it truly mattered. As she settled behind her rifle and began to control her breathing, Maya prepared to demonstrate once again why she had earned her fearsome reputation. The enemy commander had made his final mistake by bringing his war to her doorstep, and Maya intended to make him pay the ultimate price for that decision. The attack began at exactly 11:15 that night, announced by the sharp crack of an RPG exploding against the eastern bunker's reinforced walls. Maya felt the concussion through the ground as she pressed her eye to the scope, scanning the darkness for muzzle flashes and movement. The carefully planned silence of the night had shattered into the chaos of modern warfare, where death traveled faster than thought. Through her night vision equipment, Maya could see al-Rashid's forces advancing in multiple columns, using the terrain feature she had studied for months to mask their approach. These fighters moved with the confidence of veterans who had conquered this type of position many times before. They carried their weapons with practiced ease and communicated through hand signals that spoke of extensive training and battlefield experience. The enemy's first objective was clearly the communications bunker in the center of the outpost, where Lieutenant Colonel Petrov coordinated the defense through radio contact with the scattered positions. If they could capture or destroy that position, the remaining defenders would be isolated and vulnerable to defeat in detail. Maya realized that al-Rashid was not simply attacking. He was executing a sophisticated plan that would systematically eliminate their defensive advantages. Maya's first shot took down the enemy radio operator who was directing fire from a position near the valley's eastern ridge. The range was 730 meters, and she compensated for a slight crosswind that Dmitri had calculated using his portable weather station. The bullet struck exactly where she had aimed, instantly silencing the voice that had been coordinating the enemy assault through encrypted communications. But even as her first target fell, Maya could see that the enemy had learned from previous encounters with skilled snipers. Al-Rashid's men moved in short rushes between covered positions, never exposing themselves for more than a few seconds at a time. They used smoke grenades to obscure Maya's vision and coordinated their advances to divide her attention between multiple threats. The battle intensified as more RPGs slammed into the outpost's defensive positions. Maya could hear the distinctive sound of AK-47 fire as her fellow soldiers engaged the advancing enemy forces with everything they had. The noise was overwhelming. Automatic weapons fire mixed with the explosions of grenades and the shouted commands of men fighting for their lives in the darkness. Maya's second shot eliminated a machine gun team that had set up to provide covering fire for the main assault. The gunner had made the mistake of firing from the same position for too long, giving Maya time to identify his location and calculate the precise shot needed to neutralize the threat. At 850 meters, it was one of the longest shots she had ever attempted in combat conditions. Through her earpiece, Maya could hear Lieutenant Colonel Petrov calling for ammunition reports from each position. The situation was deteriorating rapidly as the enemy's superior numbers began to tell. The southern bunker had already taken heavy casualties, and the central communications position was under direct assault by at least 20 fighters armed with assault rifles and explosives. Maya shifted her position within the bunker using a secondary firing port that gave her a different angle on the battlefield. From this position, she could see enemy fighters attempting to flank the outpost by moving through a rocky gully that approached from the northwest. These men were clearly al-Rashid's elite troops, armed with night vision equipment and moving with the precision of Special Forces soldiers. Her third shot stopped the flanking movement before it could reach its objective. Maya had aimed for the lead scout, knowing that his fall would force the others to seek cover and buy precious time for the outpost defenders. The bullet traveled nearly 900 meters through air that shimmered with heat from burning vehicles and exploding ammunition. But as Maya worked the bolt of her rifle to chamber another round, she felt something that sent ice through her veins, the distinctive grinding sensation that meant mechanical failure. The bolt was jamming, refusing to close properly despite her efforts to force it into position. In the middle of the most important battle of her career, her trusted weapon was failing at the worst possible moment. Maya's hands flew over the rifle with the speed of long practice, attempting to clear what she hoped was a simple jam caused by dust or debris. She had performed this drill thousands of times in training, working through malfunction procedures until they became automatic responses that required no conscious thought. But as she examined the weapon more carefully, Maya realized that the problem was far more serious than a routine jam. The bolt assembly had cracked under the stress of continuous firing, creating a mechanical failure that could not be fixed with field maintenance procedures. Years of combat use in harsh conditions had finally taken their toll on the precision-engineered components that made accurate long-range shooting possible. Maya's rifle, the weapon that had defined her identity as a soldier, was completely useless. For a moment that seemed to last forever, Maya stared at the broken weapon in her hands while the battle raged around her. She could hear enemy forces advancing on all sides, their voices growing closer as they overran the outpost's outer defenses. Without her rifle, she was just another soldier with a pistol, no different from dozens of others who had already fallen to al-Rashid's superior numbers. But Maya's training kicked in before despair could take hold. She grabbed her backup weapon, a standard AK-74 assault rifle, and prepared to join the close-quarters fighting that would determine the outpost's fate. The AK was reliable and effective at short range, but it lacked the precision and reach that had made Maya a legend among snipers. She would have to adapt her tactics to match her new weapon's capabilities. Dmitri looked at her with wide eyes, understanding immediately what the broken rifle meant for their chances of survival. Maya could see the fear in his young face, but also the determination that had made him an excellent spotter despite his age. Without speaking, they both understood that the battle had entered a new phase where conventional firepower would matter more than precision shooting. Maya moved to a position where she could observe the central courtyard of the outpost, where enemy fighters were attempting to breach the communications bunker. She could see Lieutenant Colonel Petrov directing the defense from behind an overturned vehicle, his voice calm and professional despite the chaos surrounding him. The colonel had been wounded. Maya could see blood on his left arm, but he continued to coordinate his soldiers' resistance with the skill of a veteran officer. The enemy assault was reaching its climax as al-Rashid's forces pressed their advantage against the weakening defense. Maya could see fighters moving through the trenches that connected the outpost positions, systematically clearing each defensive position with grenades and automatic weapons fire. The sound of battle was deafening, but Maya could distinguish individual voices shouting orders in Arabic and English. Then, through the smoke and confusion, Maya saw a figure that made her heart race with recognition. Commander Hassan al-Rashid himself was advancing with his personal guard, moving toward the communications bunker where Lieutenant Colonel Petrov was making his final stand. Al-Rashid wore distinctive black combat gear and carried a customized assault rifle that gleamed even in the darkness. Maya estimated the range at approximately 200 meters, well within the effective range of her AK-74, but a difficult shot given the poor lighting and moving targets. She would have only one chance to eliminate the enemy commander before his forces overran the remaining defenders. Everything depended on her ability to adapt her sniper skills to a completely different type of weapon and engagement. As she prepared to take the shot that would define her legacy, Maya remembered the words her first instructor had spoken during sniper training. The deadliest weapon is not the rifle in your hands, but the mind that guides it. She had trained for years to become one with her precision rifle, but now she would have to prove that her true strength came from something deeper than any mechanical device. Al-Rashid was advancing steadily toward the communications bunker, apparently confident that victory was within his grasp. He moved with the swagger of a commander who had never faced serious opposition, surrounded by bodyguards who scanned for threats, but focused primarily on the obvious danger from the defended positions ahead. Maya controlled her breathing and estimated the wind conditions by watching smoke drift from burning equipment. The range was decreasing as Al-Rashid approached, but the target was partially obscured by his bodyguards and the smoke from battle. She would have to wait for the perfect moment when the enemy commander exposed himself completely to her line of fire. Through her peripheral vision, Maya could see that the outpost's defense was collapsing. The southern bunker had fallen completely, and enemy fighters were advancing through the trenches toward her position. In minutes, the battle would be over unless she could eliminate the enemy commander and disrupt their coordinated assault. Maya settled her AK-74 into a stable shooting position, using techniques she had learned years earlier, but rarely employed with her precision rifle. The assault weapon felt strange in her hands after months of using the Dragunov, but she forced herself to adapt to its different balance and recoil characteristics. This shot would require every bit of skill she had developed over her career. As Al-Rashid approached the communications bunker, he raised his rifle to fire at Lieutenant Colonel Petrov's position. For a brief moment, the enemy commander was perfectly silhouetted against the flames from a burning vehicle, presenting Maya with the target she had been waiting for. This was her chance, perhaps the only chance, to turn defeat into victory. Maya squeezed the trigger of her AK-74 with the same controlled precision she had used thousands of times with her sniper rifle. But the result was not what she had trained for her entire career to achieve. The burst of automatic fire stitched across the ground near Al-Rashid's feet, close enough to send him diving for cover, but missing the killing shot that would have ended the battle in that instant. The enemy commander rolled behind a concrete barrier, shouting orders to his men, while Maya cursed the limitations of her backup weapon. With her Dragunov, that shot would have been certain death at 200 meters. With the AK-74, she had managed only to alert Al-Rashid to her position and give him the chance to take better cover behind the substantial fortifications his men had constructed during their assault. Immediately, Maya found herself under concentrated fire from multiple enemy positions. Bullets sparked off the concrete walls around her firing port as Al-Rashid's bodyguards attempted to suppress her position with overwhelming firepower. The sound was deafening. Dozens of AK-47s firing in full automatic mode, their muzzle flashes creating a deadly light show in the darkness of the contested outpost. Maya pulled back from the firing port just as an RPG exploded against the exterior wall of her bunker. The concussion threw her backward, and she felt debris raining down from the damaged ceiling. Her ears were ringing, and she could taste blood in her mouth from where she had bitten her tongue during the explosion. For several seconds, she struggled to regain her bearings while the enemy continued their assault on her position. Dmitri crawled over to check on her condition, his face pale with fear and concern. The young spotter had been wounded by flying concrete fragments, and Maya could see blood running down his cheek from a deep cut near his left eye. Despite his injuries, Dmitri maintained his composure and began gathering equipment for what both of them knew might be their final movement within the bunker. Through the smoke and dust, Maya could see that Al-Rashid had used her failed assassination attempt to rally his forces for a final assault on the communications bunker. The enemy commander had positioned himself where he could observe the battle while remaining protected from sniper fire, directing his men with the skill of a professional officer who understood modern infantry tactics. Maya realized that her single burst had accomplished something important despite missing its target. Al-Rashid now knew that a skilled marksman was still active in the northern bunker, and he was directing significant resources toward eliminating that threat. This meant that fewer enemy fighters were available for the assault on Lieutenant Colonel Petrov's position, potentially buying the defenders precious time. But Maya also understood that her position was no longer tenable. The enemy would soon bring heavy weapons to bear on her bunker, and the concrete walls would not protect her from direct fire from anti-tank weapons. She needed to move to a new position where she could continue to threaten Al-Rashid while avoiding the concentrated firepower that was already zeroing in on her current location. Maya gathered her remaining ammunition and prepared to abandon the bunker that had been her home for months. The decision was difficult because the position offered excellent fields of fire and solid protection, but staying would mean certain death within the next few minutes. She had to trust her training and experience to guide her to a new position where she could continue the fight. The outpost trench system provided the only covered route between defensive positions, but Maya knew that enemy infiltrators were already moving through those same trenches. Any movement would be extremely dangerous, requiring her to navigate through areas where she might encounter Al-Rashid's fighters at point-blank range. Her AK-74 would be more suitable for that type of fighting than her broken sniper rifle ever could have been. Maya and Dmitri moved through the connecting trench toward the central area of the outpost, where they could hear the sounds of close-quarters combat echoing from the communications bunker. The trench was partially collapsed from mortar fire, and they had to climb over rubble and debris that made silent movement impossible. Every step seemed to announce their presence to any enemy soldiers who might be nearby. As they approached the central courtyard, Maya could see the full scope of the battle that was raging around the communications position. Lieutenant Colonel Petrov had established a defensive perimeter using overturned vehicles and construction materials, but his remaining soldiers were greatly outnumbered and running low on ammunition. The colonel himself was still directing the defense despite his wounds, but Maya could see that their situation was becoming desperate. Al-Rashid's forces had surrounded the communications bunker and were methodically reducing the defensive perimeter through coordinated fire and movement. Maya counted at least 20 enemy fighters still actively engaged in the assault, far more than the 6 or 7 defenders she could identify in Petrov's position. Without immediate intervention, the outpost would fall within the next few minutes. Maya positioned herself in the ruins of what had been a supply shed, giving her a clear view of Al-Rashid's command position while remaining concealed from the enemy fighters who were focused on the communications bunker. From this new position, she could see the enemy commander directing his forces through radio communications and hand signals, orchestrating the final phase of his assault. The range was approximately 150 meters, closer than her previous attempt, but still challenging given the lighting conditions and the movement of both friendly and enemy forces in the area. Maya would have to time her shot carefully to avoid hitting her own soldiers, while ensuring that she could hit Al-Rashid despite the cover he had chosen. Through her peripheral vision, Maya could see enemy fighters moving to flank the communications bunker from the eastern approach. These soldiers were carrying satchel charges that they intended to use to breach the bunker's reinforced walls, eliminating the last pocket of resistance and securing victory for Al-Rashid's forces. The timing was critical. Maya had to act before those charges could be deployed. Maya settled into a stable firing position among the rubble, using broken concrete blocks to create a solid rest for her AK-74. The assault rifle still felt foreign in her hands compared to her beloved Dragunov, but she forced herself to adapt to its characteristics and limitations. This would be her second chance to eliminate the enemy commander, and she knew there would not be a third. Al-Rashid stood up slightly to get a better view of his force's progress, exposing his upper body above the concrete barrier where he had taken cover. Maya could see his distinctive profile clearly in the firelight from burning vehicles, and She recognized the moment she had been waiting for since the battle began. The enemy commander was confident that he had neutralized the sniper threat, making him careless about his own exposure. Maya controlled her breathing and began to apply pressure to the trigger, remembering everything she had learned about engaging targets with automatic weapons at medium range. The technique was different from precision shooting, requiring her to account for the weapon's tendency to climb during sustained fire and the wider dispersion pattern of military ammunition. But just as Maya prepared to fire, a new sound entered the battlefield, the distinctive whine of incoming mortar rounds that al-Rashid's forces were using to eliminate the last pockets of resistance. Maya realized that the enemy commander had called for indirect fire support to finish the battle, and she could see the flash of mortar tubes firing from positions in the valley below. The first mortar round exploded near the communications bunker, showering the defenders with fragments and debris. Maya could see Lieutenant Colonel Petrov stagger from the blast, but the determined officer continued to direct his men's resistance, even as his position came under increasingly accurate fire. The second round landed closer, and Maya knew that the next salvo would likely destroy the bunker and everyone inside it. Maya had to make a choice between taking her shot at al-Rashid and warning the defenders about the incoming mortar fire. With her radio damaged in the earlier explosion, she could only communicate by shouting, but doing so would reveal her position to every enemy fighter in the area. The decision would determine not only her own fate, but the survival of everyone still fighting in the outpost. As she wrestled with this impossible choice, Maya caught sight of something that changed everything. Al-Rashid was holding what appeared to be a radio detonator, a device that could only be used to trigger explosive charges that his forces had planted around the outpost. Maya realized that the enemy commander was not simply planning to overrun the position. He intended to destroy it completely, killing everyone inside regardless of whether they surrendered. This revelation eliminated any doubt about what Maya had to do. Al-Rashid was not just an enemy commander. He was preparing to commit mass murder using explosives that would kill defenders and attackers alike. Maya's mission was no longer about winning a tactical engagement, but about preventing a war crime that would haunt the region for years to come. Maya adjusted her aim to account for al-Rashid's new position near the radio equipment he was using to coordinate the final assault. She could see him clearly now, silhouetted against the flames and holding the detonator that would end the battle in the most brutal way possible. This was her moment, the shot that would either save everyone in the outpost or condemn them all to death. The enemy commander raised the detonator toward the transmission device that would send the signal to the explosive charges. Maya could see his finger moving toward the trigger mechanism, and she knew that she had only seconds to prevent a catastrophe that would kill dozens of people. Everything she had trained for her entire career came down to this single moment with a weapon that was never designed for precision shooting. Maya squeezed the trigger of her AK-74, sending a 3-round burst toward the figure who held the power of life and death in his hands. The 3 rounds from Maya's AK-74 struck al-Rashid's center mass, the impact spinning him around and sending the radio detonator flying through the air to smash against the concrete fortification behind him. The enemy commander fell backward, his hands clutching at the wounds in his chest while his bodyguards scrambled to provide medical aid and secure the area around their fallen leader. For a moment that seemed suspended in time, the entire battlefield fell silent as both sides processed what had just happened. Al-Rashid's forces had watched their seemingly invincible commander fall to a weapon they had thought neutralized, while the outpost defenders realized that the sniper who had been their guardian angel was still alive and fighting despite impossible odds. But Maya knew that eliminating al-Rashid was only the beginning of a new phase in the battle. The enemy commander's forces were still numerically superior and well-positioned to overrun the outpost, even without their leader's tactical expertise. Worse, Maya could see several fighters moving toward the radio detonator, apparently attempting to complete their commander's final order to destroy the entire position with explosives. Maya shifted her position within the rubble, seeking a new angle that would allow her to engage the fighters who were threatening to trigger the explosive charges. Her movement drew immediate fire from multiple enemy positions, forcing her to take cover behind a concrete slab that had been blasted loose from one of the bunker walls. Bullets sparked and ricocheted around her position as al-Rashid's men sought revenge for their fallen leader. Through the chaos of gunfire and explosions, Maya could hear new sounds that gave her hope for the first time since the battle began. The distinctive rotor noise of approaching helicopters echoed across the valley, growing louder with each passing second. Maya realized that the reinforcements Lieutenant Colonel Petrov had requested were finally arriving, drawn by the sounds of battle and the emergency radio transmissions that had been broadcast throughout the night. But the timing was critical. Maya could see enemy fighters preparing to retreat toward their vehicles, and she knew that they would attempt to trigger the explosive charges as a final act of destruction before withdrawing from the battlefield. The approaching helicopters would need several minutes to reach the outpost and deploy their forces, time that the defenders did not have if the explosives were detonated. Maya made the decision to abandon her covered position and advance across the open ground toward the radio detonator, knowing that this action would expose her to concentrated fire from every enemy position still active in the area. It was a tactical decision that violated every principle of sniper employment she had ever learned, but it was the only way to prevent the total destruction of the outpost and everyone inside it. Dmitri attempted to follow her, but Maya ordered him to remain in cover and provide what fire support he could with his personal weapon. The young spotter was wounded and would only slow her movement across the dangerous ground between her position and the critical radio equipment. Maya would have to make this final assault alone, relying on speed and surprise to reach her objective before the enemy could stop her. Maya sprinted across the courtyard, firing her AK-74 in controlled bursts at any enemy fighter who presented a clear target. The weapon's automatic fire capability proved invaluable in suppressing multiple threats simultaneously, forcing al-Rashid's men to seek cover instead of concentrating their fire on her exposed position. She moved with the fluid grace of an athlete, using every piece of cover and concealment available while advancing toward her goal. An enemy fighter emerged from behind an overturned vehicle, raising his rifle to engage Maya at point-blank range. Maya's response was instantaneous, putting a 3-round burst into the fighter's center mass before he could complete his aim. The engagement took place at less than 20 meters, demonstrating that Maya's deadly skills were not limited to long-range precision shooting, but extended to close-quarters combat as well. As Maya approached the area where al-Rashid had fallen, she could see that the enemy commander was still alive but seriously wounded. His bodyguards had dragged him behind better cover, but blood loss was rapidly weakening his ability to direct his forces or coordinate their withdrawal. Maya realized that capturing al-Rashid alive would provide valuable intelligence about enemy operations throughout the region, but her immediate priority was securing the radio detonator before any of al-Rashid's remaining fighters could use it to trigger the explosive charges. Maya could see the device lying among the debris near the concrete fortification, its antennas still intact, and ready to transmit the signal that would destroy everything they had fought to defend. Maya reached the detonator just as an enemy fighter rounded the corner of the fortification, clearly intending to complete his commander's final order. The range was less than 10 meters, and Maya fired without hesitation, her bullets finding their target before he could reach the radio equipment. The fighter fell forward, his rifle clattering across the concrete as his body went limp. With the immediate threat neutralized, Maya secured the radio detonator and began the process of disarming the device. Her training in explosive ordnance disposal had been limited, but she understood enough about radio-controlled systems to recognize the safety mechanisms that would prevent accidental detonation. She removed the battery pack and destroyed the antenna, ensuring that the device could never be used to trigger the charges that al-Rashid had planted around the outpost. The sound of helicopter rotors was now overwhelming as the first aircraft approached the landing zone that Lieutenant Colonel Petrov had marked with signal flares. Maya could see heavily armed soldiers rappelling from the helicopters, bringing the reinforcements and firepower needed to secure the outpost and eliminate the remaining enemy forces. The tide of battle was finally turning in favor of the defenders. Al-Rashid's remaining fighters recognized that their situation had become hopeless with the arrival of reinforcements and the loss of their commander. Maya could see them beginning to withdraw toward their vehicles, carrying their wounded and attempting to escape before the fresh troops could establish a perimeter around the battlefield. Some fighters continued to resist, but their efforts were disorganized and ineffective without central command. Maya advanced toward al-Rashid's position, her AK-74 ready to engage any threats that might emerge from the smoke and confusion of the disintegrating enemy assault. She found the wounded commander lying behind a concrete barrier, his bodyguards either dead or fled, leaving him alone and helpless as blood pooled beneath his body. Al-Rashid looked up at Maya with eyes that showed recognition of who she was and what she represented. He had heard stories about the female sniper who had terrorized his forces for months, but he had never expected to meet her face to face under these circumstances. Maya could see both fear and grudging respect in his expression as he realized that his war was finally over. Maya kept her weapon trained on al-Rashid while she called for medical assistance through the radio she had taken from one of his fallen bodyguards. Despite everything the enemy commander had done, she was a professional soldier who followed the rules of warfare regarding the treatment of prisoners. Al-Rashid would be captured alive and brought to justice through legal proceedings rather than summary execution on the battlefield. The reinforcements quickly established control over the outpost, providing medical aid to the wounded defenders and beginning the process of clearing the area of remaining enemy forces. Maya learned that her unit had held their position for over 4 hours against overwhelming odds, inflicting heavy casualties on al-Rashid's forces while sustaining remarkably light losses considering the intensity of the fighting. Lieutenant Colonel Petrov approached Maya as medics worked to stabilize al-Rashid's condition for transport to a military hospital. The colonel's arm was in a makeshift sling, but his eyes showed the pride and gratitude he felt toward the soldier who had saved his command through her extraordinary courage and skill. Petrov had witnessed Maya's final assault across open ground, recognizing it as one of the most audacious acts of heroism he had ever seen. Maya stood over her broken Dragunov rifle, looking at the weapon that had defined her identity as a soldier for so many years. The rifle was damaged beyond repair, its precision-engineered components destroyed by the stress of constant combat operations. But Maya realized that the weapon's failure had taught her something important about the true source of her effectiveness as a warrior. As dawn broke over the battlefield, Maya understood that her reputation had not come from the rifle she carried, but from the skills, determination, and courage that no mechanical failure could destroy. She had proven that the deadliest weapon in any arsenal was not a piece of equipment, but the mind and spirit of the warrior who wielded it. Her victory over al-Rashid would become a legend that inspired soldiers for generations to come. The battle was over, but Maya's story was just beginning. Word of her achievement would spread throughout the military and beyond, establishing her as a symbol of what could be accomplished when skill met determination in the face of impossible odds. She had shown the world that sometimes the greatest victories come not from the weapons we carry, but from the strength we find within ourselves when everything else fails. 3 months after the battle at the outpost, Maya found herself standing before a gathering of the highest-ranking military officials in the country, receiving decorations that recognized her extraordinary service and the courage she had displayed during that decisive night. The ceremony took place in the capital's most prestigious military academy, where future officers would study her actions as an example of tactical brilliance and personal heroism. The official citation read before the assembled crowd described how Senior Sergeant Maya Kozlova had single-handedly prevented the destruction of a critical outpost, eliminated a high-value enemy commander, and saved the lives of her fellow soldiers through actions that exceeded every standard of military excellence. The words captured the tactical details of her achievement, but Maya knew that they could never convey the full reality of what had happened during those crucial hours. Maya's broken Dragunov rifle had been sent to the military's Technical Evaluation Center, where specialists confirmed that the weapon had suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure that would have rendered it completely useless. The engineers marveled at how Maya had continued to fight effectively with a backup weapon that was never designed for precision shooting, adapting her skills to overcome limitations that would have defeated most soldiers. The investigation into al-Rashid's network had revealed the true scope of the threat that Maya's actions had neutralized. The captured enemy commander possessed detailed plans for coordinated attacks against civilian and military targets throughout the region, operations that would have resulted in hundreds of casualties if they had been successfully executed. Maya's decision to pursue and eliminate al-Rashid had prevented a campaign of terror that would have destabilized the entire area. Maya's fellow soldiers had testified about her actions during the battle, describing how she had adapted to changing circumstances and continued to fight effectively even after her primary weapon failed. Lieutenant Colonel Petrov spoke particularly eloquently about Maya's final assault across open ground, calling it one of the most courageous acts he had witnessed in 25 years of military service. But the most meaningful recognition for Maya came from the families of the soldiers whose lives she had saved during that night. Letters arrived from across the country, written by parents, spouses, and children who thanked her for bringing their loved ones home safely. These personal messages meant more to Maya than any official decoration because they represented the human cost of warfare and the real impact of her actions. Maya had been offered promotion to officer rank and assignment to prestigious positions within the military's special operations community. However, she chose to return to frontline service as an instructor at the military sniper school, where she could share her experience with the next generation of precision marksmen. Maya believed that teaching others was the best way to honor the memory of those who had not survived similar battles. The sniper school where Maya now taught was located in a remote mountain facility that replicated the challenging conditions students would face in actual combat operations. Maya's students included both male and female soldiers from various military branches, all of whom had volunteered for the demanding training program that would qualify them as precision marksmen in their respective units. Maya's teaching methods emphasized adaptability and mental toughness rather than dependence on equipment or technology. She regularly created training scenarios where students had to complete missions with malfunctioning or inappropriate weapons, forcing them to develop the improvisational skills that had saved her life during the battle with al-Rashid. These exercises became legendary among students for their realism and difficulty. One particular lesson that Maya emphasized involved the psychological aspects of precision shooting under extreme stress. She would tell her students about the moment when her rifle failed, describing not just the mechanical aspects of the malfunction, but the mental challenge of maintaining focus and effectiveness when everything seemed lost. These discussions helped students understand that their true weapon was their mind, not any piece of equipment. Maya also developed new tactical procedures for sniper teams operating in environments where enemy forces had learned to counter traditional precision shooting techniques. Her experience fighting against al-Rashid's sophisticated forces had taught her valuable lessons about how determined enemies would adapt their tactics to neutralize sniper threats, requiring constant innovation in techniques and equipment. The military's research and development community sought Maya's input on new sniper rifle designs and advanced optical systems being developed for future operations. Her first-hand experience with equipment failures under combat conditions provided invaluable feedback that influenced the design of more reliable weapons that could withstand the harsh realities of modern warfare. Maya's story had spread far beyond military circles, inspiring civilians who face their own challenges in daily life. She received invitations to speak at schools, universities, and community organizations about overcoming adversity and finding strength in difficult situations. Maya was initially reluctant to accept these speaking engagements, but she gradually recognized the value of sharing her experience with broader audiences. During these civilian presentations, Maya would focus on the universal principles that had guided her actions during the battle: preparation, adaptability, and perseverance in the face of seemingly impossible odds. She emphasized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act effectively despite being afraid. These messages resonated with audiences who faced their own battles in business, education, and personal relationships. Maya's influence extended to international military exchanges where foreign officers came to study her techniques and learn from her experience. Her teaching methodology was adopted by sniper schools in allied countries, spreading her tactical innovations throughout the global military community. Maya took particular pride in mentoring female soldiers from other nations who were breaking barriers in their own military systems. The outpost where Maya had fought her most famous battle had been rebuilt and converted into a training facility where soldiers could study the terrain and learn about the tactical decisions that had determined the outcome of that crucial engagement. A monument commemorated the soldiers who had fought there, with special recognition of Maya's actions that had saved so many lives. Maya would sometimes visit the reconstructed outpost, walking through the positions where she had fought and remembering the colleagues who had stood with her during those desperate hours. These visits reminded her of the responsibility that came with survival, the obligation to honor those who had fallen by continuing to serve others and sharing the lessons learned through their sacrifice. The captured enemy weapons and equipment from al-Rashid's forces had been analyzed by intelligence specialists, revealing sophisticated training and supply networks that extended across multiple countries. Maya's role in disrupting these networks had contributed to a broader campaign that significantly reduced terrorist activities throughout the region, saving countless civilian lives. Maya's personal life had also evolved in the years following her famous battle. She had married a fellow military instructor and started a family, finding balance between her professional responsibilities and personal happiness. Her children would grow up hearing stories about their mother's courage, understanding that heroism was not about seeking glory, but about doing what was necessary to protect others. As Maya looked toward the future, she remained committed to military service and the training of new soldiers who would face challenges that she could not even imagine. The nature of warfare was constantly evolving, but the fundamental principles she had learned, preparation, adaptability, and courage under fire, would remain relevant regardless of technological changes. Maya's legacy extended far beyond her personal achievements. She had proven that gender was irrelevant when it came to courage and effectiveness in combat, opening doors for other women who wanted to serve in roles that had previously been restricted. Her example demonstrated that true strength came from character and training rather than physical attributes or traditional expectations. The broken rifle that had nearly cost Maya her life now resided in a place of honor at the military academy, serving as a powerful symbol of the importance of preparing for the unexpected. Students would examine the damaged weapon and learn about the night when equipment failure had tested one soldier's true capabilities, revealing strength that no mechanical device could provide. Maya understood that her story would outlive her own service, becoming part of the military's institutional memory and inspiring future generations of soldiers who would face their own impossible situations. She had learned that the greatest victories often came not from perfect equipment or ideal circumstances, but from the courage to continue fighting when everything seemed lost. The lesson of Maya's triumph was simple but profound. The human spirit, properly trained and tested, could overcome any obstacle that stood between a soldier and the mission that defined their purpose. Her broken rifle had become a symbol of resilience, proving that sometimes the greatest strength is found not in what we carry, but in who we choose to become when everything else fails.